will all benefit with the inputs given by our eminent speakers. Thank you once again. I request Sanjay Rawalji, our past president, to take webinar forward and share his experience in the cyber security also. Thank you.
Before Sanjay Rawalji takes up, I will just like to mention that I was just studying the list of the participants. I would like to inform to the speakers that we have participants right from Chandigarh to Cochin and from Rajkot to Calcutta, from 14 cities of the country. Over to you, Mr. Sanjay Rao. And in the last, the concluding remarks and vote of thanks will be done by our alternate president, Mr. Virendra Mansukhani. Over to you, Mr. Sanjay Rawal.
Thank you, Saravaji. Thank you, Vandaji. Broadly speaking, I think we live in a world which is got very, very interconnected. Our businesses and our personal lives have got subsumed with technology itself. So while most of us would have received the link for this webinar on our WhatsApp or email, we would have seamlessly been able to click a link and get onto this. Now that obviously means that some of the data on your phone is now has in some manner been exposed to the outside world. So if anybody imagines that too many things are private anymore, then they're mistaken. You need to make a concerted effort to try to make sure that there is a moat, or let's say there is a wall around data that you're willing to share and which is mandatory for you to share, and what the world is trying to take from you. So I think from a sort of higher level perspective, being able to understand and appreciate where are your vulnerabilities relating to data is very important. On the more specific area relating to our industry and some of the compliances that we will have to go through now, I think Kailash and I were fortunate enough to have been sort of aware of what the evolution of some of these circulars were, and to a very large extent Vinderji also. I think the philosophy behind most of this is just to try to force participants, that means people like us, to become very aware of our data and therefore to make sure that we are not exposing that data to any malicious actors. We'll get to the specifics with Kailash, but insofar as the regulatory environment and the reason for this, I'm going to leave it to the other three speakers. The format that we have thought of is essentially about 10 minutes, just under 10 minutes for each speaker, except for Kailash, who will have somewhat more time because he'll talk a bit more about specifics. But I think one of the good starting points that maybe Kailash will pick up on will be about the recent Twitter hack and why it affects all of us, and why what looks like something that we do on the phone, which is follow some people on Twitter, becomes important from our business standpoint. So I'll leave it to Dineshji and Praveshji to start off from the exchange perspective, and then go from there. Thank you. Dineshji and Praveshji, up to you.
Good morning, everyone. Special thanks to Narendra Vadlaji, Sagarwalji, Amresh Bhai, and Sanjayji for giving this opportunity to us to present our views on this platform. It has been, I think what you may know that I was elected. So I have a special, attachment with commodity markets, and I worked there for more than 5.5 years. So keenly appreciated when the commodities market was rising. So it is indeed a pleasure for me to come to this platform and speak to all of you. Thank you very much again for this opportunity. So we are starting off from, I think I will just do the incident. We attended a ISO International Annual Conference wherein there was a talk of technology that nowadays there is a lot of pointing of words happen, and then they are taken all over the place. So one of the words is RegTech, regulatory technology. So one of the speakers said, RegTech is correct. The online exchanges world over, it started off with some of them, the initiatives which India also took. So that was the biggest change that happened in our securities market. So I think we have come a long way from that. And the importance of this aspect cannot be, so important that our lives are dependent on our daily bread and butter, our organization, whether the entire ecosystem is highly dependent on the safety and integrity of this of the technology we use. More important, it is because of the reason now what happens that for the supervision purpose there has been so much of reporting happening. It is not only the trading side, it is also the back office and the maintenance of integrity of records. Because I think practically now after the funds have also been practically reporting to the exchanges, securities are coming. There is so much of data flow within the brokers and the exchanges, and the expectations are very high. So we have seen there have been many of the incidents wherein data privacy measures were not at the desired level taken on. So which has impacted significantly impacted some of the cases. What happens that not correct data goes to the exchange, and there is unnecessary burden on the brokers because everyone in this given situation they are very very much stressed because not all human resources are in a position to contribute. Everyone offices, very few people are coming to office. So given all this situation, we are indeed just 1 minute. I will next home is just 1 minute.
In the meantime, can I kindly request everybody to be on mute except for the speaker? And if you are logged in on more than one instance of the same, you will find that there is an echo. So if you could kindly just log in at one location and please keep yourself on mute constantly while the speaker is speaking. Thank you so much.
So that was perhaps the reason, just the major policy framework, many of you would know, but perhaps the pressures in the industry and all the policy framework, the SEBI adopts, flows from the, what guidelines are given by the ISO. And there is a regular examination of the country-wide report is done because, for this entire, whether it is anti-money laundering or it is the compliance, there are a set of 30 principles which ISO has given. So the cyber security happens to be one of them, which that is the reason it flows from the ISO to SEBI, and then SEBI has to adopt for the market. So one is the regulatory perspective, and one is the need of it to adopt by the market so that we remain safe, we remain secure. So NSE has a lot of work in this area, and on day-to-day manner we have these significant attacks. So my colleague will later on cover. But before that, I think what has happened is that in the COVID situation, after this remote working, like as Sanjay mentioned, there has been an entire shift in the way businesses are being performed. So because of this, there has been an enhanced opportunities which have been, the situation has given to the hackers and people who want to, maliciously attack us. So this is this is one of the opportunity which has been extended to them. So there is a need to have, it is because of this particular situation we are into in. And this situation seemed to be not earlier we thought it would be a matter of few weeks. The way the extensions were given, the way work from home were allowed. But I think it is going to stay for a longer time, more than even though when the situation will be over. Perhaps I think organization will definitely shift to a work from home model because it is going to different kind of challenges, different kind of opportunities as well to reduce certain costs. So this enhanced digital flow of data between the organizations and the staff which is working from home, it has created significantly. So there are ways to kind of put ourselves. I'm sure the speakers are going to cover in some of the sessions later on. I would those technical things I will leave it up to them. So with regard to our requirements, I think we have already put in place a system wherein quarterly basis workers have to report to us in case certain pets they have got a certain attack they have sustained. So these are some of the measures which one thing I can assure you is that we would this is I think perhaps a start which is being made by the regulator, and there would be a lot of hand holding. Initial bit I think there is no need to worry, but it has to come from the top level in the organization that this is something in our own self-interest. It should not be taken as a burden because Narendraji mentioned, what is the case study. So I would like to mention a case study wherein, we got certain references from finance ministry wherein a very large broker, there was a data theft of a large broker that went all over the place. So it was not expected, and the sharing of that particular broker's data, was it was kind of all over, and then there was a concern at the highest level. And then after such kind of incidents come into force, and it is not perhaps good for the entire ecosystem, and then we also not send the correct message to the policy maker. So given this situation, I think there is a need for all of us to lay emphasis on the security measures, and we extend a significant handholding in terms of the programs like this. Otherwise, also our teams are we can whatever best we can do, we can handle the members. So I would just close by this remark, and I would request Parvesh to cover some bit of what exactly we do in the cyber security area, what NSC does, how do we secure ourselves, because that is also very important for the brokers to know. So handing over to you, Pravesh, please.
Morning, everyone. This is Pravesh here. Am I audible?
Yeah, Pravesh, you're audible.
Okay.
Yes,
so I am the Chief Information Security Officer for NSE IFCCR's International Exchange, and I would like to quickly touch base upon the kind of attacks that we have seen since the lockdown had initiated with reference to COVID-19, and different threat vectors in terms of the social engineering attacks or the kind of scams that had come in, or remote login attacks or malware attacks were seen on a high rise. As an organization, we have taken certain measures to start with remote accesses, which NSC till this point in time had never considered as an option. We had to all of a sudden ensure that our staff is safe and secure, and we wanted to enable a secure remote work from home situation. A framework was put into place with mechanisms and methodology so that all my applications for all the users would be able to log in securely without any issues. So we set up a framework for that. People were coming in with their own devices because, ensuring that each and every one of our 2,000 odd large employee numbers, providing them with laptops or systems at a go was not feasible. So we sort of enhanced our processes in terms of how do they connect, what are the bare minimum things that the laptops or the BYOD devices that our employees would connect to were taken into consideration. Only a limited set of employees were allowed to connect initially. After due authorization from senior management, were they actually required to join in, or were they actually required to connect to the systems to start with? There were control measures put in so that, whenever that they connect, their communication is encrypted. They have a two-factor authentication when they log in onto these systems remotely, safely, and securely. Multi-factor authentication verification was, the process that was required, because giving the accesses over a VPN tunnel or in an insecure manner would have led to much more problems. So we ensured that everybody who's connecting from their homes come in via multi-factor authentication verification process. So that was put in quickly. Over a period of time, we enhanced, or rather we allowed more users to join in, more employees to join in simultaneously as the COVID-19 situation extended. With respect to that, we also ensured that only they go and land onto certain systems within our environment. Whenever somebody connects from their home laptops or home desktop, they come and land onto certain systems within our environment, and then from there, basis of internal controls what we already had in terms of privileged access management and stringent access control methodology, they would then continue with their own accesses which have been provisioned to them. So we try to evaluate those as well. Over a period of time, with random checks were taken into consideration, whether we have enhanced our monitoring systems. Earlier, we had web application firewalls, or the monitoring was taken into consideration from intel sources, the likes of Certain or NCIPC or other services that we had been taken up. The IOCs that come in from these threat intel platforms are blocked immediately. We enhance our monitoring capabilities over the remote connections as well, in order to ensure there are no, to give everyone an instance, somebody connecting over a phone and somebody connecting over a laptop with the same ID. So these kind of situations, these kind of use cases were detected, that the same user was trying to log into multiple devices. We fine-tune those tools, or somebody using a remote proxy of any other country. That was taken into consideration. We ensured that we spread this sort of an awareness to our internal users. Was also taken up. The monitoring was enhanced. There seems to be some echo. Can somebody go on? The monitoring was enhanced. We had 24/7 monitoring. Our SOC works 24/7 and ensures that all the attacks or the traffic which flows in and out of the exchange or within the exchange as well is completely monitored. There were instances of increased brute force attacks, or they were blocked and monitored on a continuous basis during this period of 3 to 4 months. We ensured that or even for the members, we should ensure that in case if there is a ransomware attack, we should have a policy in place in terms of a cyber crisis management policy document. In terms of cyber security crisis, what would be your response? I'm sure everybody would have a BCP policy in place, but how about the cyber crisis management plan? Tomorrow, if there is an attack onto one of your systems, you should have a cyber crisis management plan as well, which would outline right from identification to your mitigation steps to the place where you would invoke your cyber crisis management team, should also be considered. With the work from home situations like these, and threat actors being much more active, taking into consideration the situations where people are much more frightened or gullible, a cyber crisis management plan should also be in place for the members. We have one in place, and in order to test its efficiency, we conduct or we participate in drills, ensuring that our cybersecurity preparedness is up to the mark. So that is also what can be done. Apart from this, as I mentioned already, a secure multi-factor authentication setup, enhanced monitoring, CCMP, or if you would want to call it Cyber Crisis Security Management Plan. These were the quick measures that we had taken in order to ensure that our systems are working efficiently enough and there are no, breaches or attacks because of the enhanced threat actor activities. A major part also was in terms of ensuring that our internal users, be they working in office or they working from their home, the awareness part of it, wherein we ensured we go about giving them timely notifications and timely awareness sessions through emailers, asking them for do's and don'ts in terms of, if you're connecting from your home, you should have your Wi-Fi routers protected. You should have strong passwords that you would use in order to log on to your systems. They should not be clicking on to multiple links from unknown sources because, again, they are using their own systems or their own laptops in majority of the cases, and ensure that their patches on the systems are updated. We are all aware, many of the laptops that people have, personal laptops, the OS versions themselves are not, a genuine license. Many of them are not genuine. The chances of it getting updated periodically is very less. So we ensured, or we rather asked our staff members, our employees who would be connecting to ensure that they have updated patches of antiviruses. The connections that they use in terms of while connecting to the offices should be secure enough. They should not be using any local or public Wi-Fi networks in order to connect to office networks, which are much more susceptible towards attack. If possible, they can go about doing their disk encryption. One thing that I would want to bring here is we ensured that no official or confidential data was downloaded onto their system. So we had put in control mechanisms such that, all the data remains within NSE's environment. No data would be, or no information could be downloaded onto their personal systems or laptops. So that is something what the members of the end users should ensure. And in order to avoid ransomware attacks, regular backups of your systems should be taken up. The disks should be encrypted tomorrow, even if there is a situation where a ransomware attack is materialized. You still have your confidential information staying with you. So these were some of the quick measures that we had taken into consideration during this COVID-19 situation. From an organization perspective, as I said, apart from
Pravesi, we will have to start moving on to maybe another couple of minutes. Yes?
Absolutely. So, just to reiterate, the things that we ensured, quick wins was enhanced monitoring, ensuring that all the systems which connect to our environment are multi-factor authenticated. Remote accesses, antivirus, anti-malware solutions, if you could procure, they should be patched and updated regularly. Ensure that you frequently conduct your BCPs or, ensure that the readiness of your BCPs are in place in such kind of situation. So these were the quick wins that we ensured within NSE to tackle. With that, I would like to conclude my time, and thank you for giving me this opportunity.
Thank you, Dinesh and Pravesi. I think, while we all seem to think that, we are insignificant, and we seem to think that, nobody will attack us, but that's just not true. I mean, hackers worldwide are constantly looking for open ports and open situations where they can exploit the situation. So thank you very much for your insight and your what steps that NSE and NSE IFSC took to ensure that during this phase you were not particularly vulnerable. I'm sure you were attacked multiple times, but most members actually don't realize that they are also attacked on an ongoing basis. It's just that they don't have the tools to figure out that they've been attacked. I will leave that discussion again with Kailash later on. But may I please request Mr. Neeraj Arora to give his thoughts.
So, very good morning to all of you. Am I audible, Sanjay?
Yes. Yeah, perfect.
So, it's my privilege to be here, and I'm thankful to the CPAI for giving me this opportunity. So, while looking from the legal perspective, cyber security has its own ramification, and in fact, I would say they are more serious. See, if we look upon the cyber security, then there is one domain that we need to protect our data, and because data is our financial asset, we do the business of the basis of the data. But there is another perspective which is even more serious in the eyes of law. Under the Information Technology Act, the data belonging to the securities market, belonging to the financial market, is a personal sensitive data. So once it's a personal sensitive data, then there are a number of rules, regulations which are applicable on this data, particularly relating to the cyber security. So under the sensitive personal data rule, we have section 43A, and the rules which are notified under that particular provision put a obligation on the brokers to put into place information security management practices, policies, and compliance of ISO 27001, which is mandatory as per the Information Technology Act. So that is the one domain. Second, the compliance which the broker has to do is regarding the compliances of the notification or circular which are given by the SEBI. First, they have to comply with both. That means they have to comply with the section 43A requirement. They have to comply with the Reasonable Security Practices regulation. They all at the same time they have to comply with the state. Though under the Reasonable Security Practices rule, there is a provision that central government can notify that only the provision of a particular regulator would apply. But unfortunately, I think no initiative has been taken by either the brokers or by the SEBI or by the exchanges that there should be a unified command and there could be a notification from the central government that only they are required to comply with the SEBI regulation. So here, now the broker is required to comply with both. Now how it is going to change? Already, this our Personal Data Protection Bill 2019 have already been drafted by the legislature, and it is into the process of the passing into the parliament. The moment it is passed, the kind of compliances you have to do, they are the enormous. The reason is, then you have to implement the privacy by design. So that means all the application, all your server, all the software, whatever you are using has to be changed altogether. Then you need to put a separate security audit for that. And there are another regulator would be the Data Protection Authority. Now coming to the another compliance which is under the Information Technology Act, more serious, which I have the more serious ramification, that is the provision relating to the liability of the intermediary. So broker who is acting on behalf of the client, who is doing the trading for the client, and within a definition of the intermediary under the Information Technology Act 2000. So under section 79, so suppose if now there is a breach, if the breach is committed, then the due diligence which is provided under the Information Technology Act has to be done by the broker, and if there is no due diligence, the broker would be liable to be prosecuted. So that is a third compliance. Why I am saying it is so serious? Because under section 85 of the Information Technology Act, if any offence is committed under the Information Technology Act, and there is any negligence, so I'm using the word negligence, or lack into the due diligence, then every officer, every director of the company who is handling that particular area is liable to be prosecuted. So I think you might be aware about the case of the Bati.com, where there was one video which was being sold on the website of the Bati, which was a scam. And the police have arrested the Vineet Bajaj, one of their directors, apart from the various other officers. So here, that is the only act under the Information Technology Act. There is only single provision under the Section 85 of the Information Technology Act which provides for static liability. Static liability means you will be prosecuted and the burden to defend is on you. So when you look from that particular angle, so cyber security is one of the very, I would say that area which needs to be taken very seriously, because the liability under the criminal law, liability for paying the damages under Section 43A, they are the huge. For example, I give a very simple example. If one account statement is leaked from the office of a broker and it goes in the hand of any other person, and that particular person to whom that account statement belongs, if he wants to file a case, he can file a case. He can claim the damages to the extent of 5 crores. Right? Secondly, he can also do the criminal prosecution under Section 72A because it is a person sensitive data. And another one of the serious limitation is that if we look from the angle of the liability of the broker being a custodian, then the Section 409 also becomes applicable to the broker because it specifically talks about the misappropriation of the data which is with the broker. Here the liability goes to the extent of life imprisonment. So I think the ramifications for any breach would be serious, particularly taking into account that once there is a breach, once there is an offense, then an officer of the rank of the inspector would be doing the investigation. Convincing him that you are complying with cyber security would be something which is very difficult. So I would advise that it would be into the interest of the entire industry, that industry should go to the regulator, should get a notification from the central government that they would be only liable to comply with the regulation of the SEBI, not under the cyber law. Because that remedy is given under the cyber law itself. That if there is a regulator, if there is any industry association who are providing for the compliances on the cyber security, then central government can notify that they are not required to comply with the provision of the Information Technology Act. That is the one part. Another thing which we need to look, and the lesson which we need to learn is from the Sony Health case. See, now the context of the security has changed, cyber security has changed. That particular hacking episode, that Sony case has given a very beautiful lesson to the society. That whatever best technology you may have, you may apply your ideas, firewall, whatever you can do, but that is not going to protect. What is going to protect you is the security and awareness about the security and the education. After that particular Sony Hack case in 2014, the entire industry have changed the concept of this cyber security, and they have this cyber security awareness and training. And one of the another feature which they have introduced, particularly if you look upon the big companies like Dell and Sun, they are employing any person as an employee. So they are putting one clause. And the clause is that if you make a mistake 3 times in responding to a phishing mail, or in downloading something which you are not allowed to do, then your services are being terminated. So we also need to put more insistence on the cybersecurity awareness and training, and above all, we need to put all these things into black and white. Because now, under the Information Technology Act, there are 2 things that every company should have: the explicit information security policy practices. So that need to be into the black and white, and compliance we have to show. So we need to comply with all this. So now over to Sanjay.
Thank you, Neeraj. I think while I think I do try to keep up with some of the laws relating to cybercrime, I am in fact some of the things that you said even I was not aware of, and it's significant that you raised this issue of whether we can lobby with our regulator, and through the regulator therefore get changes made to effectively the CRPC, thereby protecting our business interest and our personal liability. And I would certainly urge our President Vadlaji to sort of pursue this line of action. I think it's certainly something that I was not fully aware of, and something that we ought to really push. I'm going to now request Kailash to sort of start talking about his experiences, which are more day-to-day and more he has to deal with multiple people who are going to be attacking his systems, and because he's got such a large number of retail / high net worth individuals who are trading on his platform, it becomes even more difficult for him to look at your aspects and or sort of prevent them. I'm sure they're doing a great job of it, but I think it will be great if Kailash can sort of share some of his insights, especially when you look at something like the recent Twitter hack, and also then if he wants to touch on any specific areas of some of the compliances that we have now asked us to do. Over to you, Kailash.
Thank you, Sanjay. Thank you. I'd like to say that Sri Neeraj Arora's talk and the points that he touched upon, they were very illuminating, and that highlights the extreme seriousness of the matter. And to be very honest, I completely agree with him. It doesn't matter how good our firewalls are, how good our technology is. At the end of the day, some of the biggest hacks, the biggest cybersecurity breaches happen via humans being the weak links. Someone accidentally clicking the wrong link. Like Sanjay said, the Twitter hack that happened recently is very interesting, and it's in fact one of the biggest breaches ever. No data in particular was really leaked because there have been bigger data leaks, but the ramifications were extreme. So Twitter is a platform where some of the most powerful people on the planet, presidents, extremely powerful people, openly communicate with the world. And they also have, Twitter as a company, they've got sophisticated mechanisms to prevent attacks. So the breach happened because the attackers, the criminals, they socially engineered. They played on the emotions of certain employees, got them to install a few things, click a few links, and got access to the backend systems. There was nothing technical. We often like to think that hackers are, people sitting in dark rooms writing code. That is not really the case. Bulk of these attacks are just simple social engineering mechanisms. Once they got access to Twitter, they could tweet out anything as the US president. And then you can imagine, one wrong tweet could, cause a geopolitical storm or, tank markets, or it would have been very serious. Fortunately, no such thing happened. So the point here is that technical sophistication to prevent attacks is one thing. And like Sanjay said earlier, it's very easy for an entity, depending on the expanse of the business size, to think that we're too small. Nobody's going to look at us, or we're not big fry or big fish. But that is not true at all. It is always just a matter of attention. It could just be someone with malicious intents passing by, coming across a website or your website, or accidentally stumbling upon a link to your back office, who spots something. And it could just be the private data of 10 customers that are leaked. But depending on who those customers are, the ramifications could be extreme. So it's obviously just a matter of attention. And With reference to the circular, we got to, again, like Sanjay said earlier, we actually got to sit with SEBI, in that panel. We drafted, redrafted, we actually co-authored. And I'll be very honest, it's an exhaustive document, I think 54 or 58 points. And the compliance burden from a regulatory perspective and from an implementation perspective is very heavy. It is very easy to just look at it, look at all those technical points and say, this doesn't affect me, or I'll just get a certificate to, be done with it because it's another compliance checkbox. I understand that because it is really complicated, it is burdenous, but barring commenting on that any further, I'd like to say that no matter how burdenous that circular may seem, the spirit is basically making members, brokers, aware of the ramifications of cybersecurity. There are many specifics there. You have to do this, use this encryption, that encryption. Those are just guidelines. Each member may not really be able to implement those very specific guidelines. But the broad principles should be read and understood, because at the end of the day, like I said, anything can happen to anyone, irrespective of how sophisticated their technology is. And we can quickly go over a few very broad specifics in that document. I'm not going to cite points and explain them, but just touch upon certain things. And I'll also highlight our experiences at Zerodha in dealing with these things. And we can start off, before I say that, I don't have my video on because on my laptop, I don't have a physical web camera. So when I got the laptop, I specifically requested for a camera not to be integrated because you never know. It's a cybersecurity measure. So that is one tiny thing, but that is how you have to approach this problem. Any choice that one can make, just be cognizant of that one little thing of a potential data or privacy leak. One should be cognizant. And this is just me personally. So you can imagine the number of things that are really worth looking at inside a financial company. So phishing, I think we can talk about phishing to begin with, and I'll cite very specific examples. So over the last 3-4 months, there has been a surge of new retail users coming to the market, first-time users, people who've never interacted with stock markets. And this is across the industry. And the number of cyber attacks, and when I say attack, I don't mean a sophisticated technical attack, writing code, just social engineering, someone sending like a fake SMS. The number of attacks have gone up drastically. At Zerodha, there have been, I think, half a dozen incidents where our customers lost money. So a criminal sent an SMS to a potential client and click on this link to buy a multi-bag of stock. And that is how it always works. There's no sophistication there. Client clicks on it because, greed is at play. Then a web page opens up where the login page looks exactly like Zerodha's login page. The website's address at the top says, whatever zrdho.com. But the client is oblivious. The login page has been designed by the criminal to look like Zerodha's login page. The client enters his username and password, and that's it. That was the criminal's wrong, and they've just obtained the credentials. Once they've obtained the credentials, there are many things that can do. And one of the most common hacks, financial frauds that these criminals perpetrate is moving funds using illiquid instruments. I don't know how possible that is in the commodities markets. I'm not familiar, but with illiquid options, the syndicate of criminals, they trade on it and move losses from broker to broker, account to account. And that's basically one of the easiest ways for criminals to make money out of a stock. And they did not have to really understand technology or scan Zerodha's systems or look at codes or, fight with our firewall. They didn't have to do any of that. All they had to do was send an SMS, bulk SMS to a large number of people. Let's say 1 lakh people. 5 or 10 people responded, leaked their credentials, and that was enough money that those criminals made in that one run. And once that happens, it is extremely damaging to the client. Of course, there's huge financial loss for the client, but there's also this sense of violation, right? It's never the same. They cannot trust Zerodha anymore. Although the mistake is entirely at the client's end. We work with cybercrime units. worked with exchanges, we've worked with SEBI over the last 3 months. And because of the current situation, although the police were able to actually pinpoint the criminals, syndicate of criminals who perpetrated this with phone numbers, addresses, everything, they were like, we'll make an arrest any week. It unfortunately did not happen because of logistical difficulties. Now, that is the appeal of cybercrime. All you need is a lot of time and a criminal attitude and an internal connection, and sitting anywhere you can target any company and their clients. Don't have to care about firewalls, don't have to care about any of those things. So it is extremely important, and it's paramount to be of phishing in organizations. We have to tell our employees never to fall victims. If someone calls up and says, I forgot my password or punch read, to absolutely ensure that the person, the client that is calling up, is really that client. It could just be someone phishing. It could be someone whose SIM was cloned. And not clicking on links or responding to suspicious messages, or being cognizant of your own brand name being used on Twitter, where certain people will register themselves pretending to be the employees of a particular stockbroker. Now, you don't have to be a big stockbroker. You could be a small broker with 100 clients, and there could be one client who's an HNI, who's the target. So there could be a Twitter phishing campaign, somebody pretending to be your employee, targeting this one client and getting into your system via their password, just to attack that one person. The broker is not even the target, it's the client. So that one is not vulnerable and nobody's looking at us. That thought just has to be let off completely. Everybody is vulnerable. So phishing is absolutely important. Just social engineering, employee emotions being toiled with. Now, the second thing, tracking onto that, and phishing, this is talked about in the circle. And the second thing is the strength passwords. I've seen this firsthand, right? In the early days at Zerodha, we got passwords to log on to NFC systems, MKX systems, the repository systems. So we've got password market infrastructure institutions. And you can't just have one employee doing this, because that employee has to have backup. So there are always a group of employees who are responsible for one task, and they handle the passwords to critical systems. And these systems have a tendency of forcing password changes every 2 weeks, and with arbitrary limitations, 6 characters maximum, 12 characters maximum. So it becomes very easy for the employee to change the password every 14 days from, my password 123 to my password 124, my password 125, and keep cycling through those simple passwords, and you're writing them down and sharing them around in the office. Now, we may think that an employee writing down a password, making a note of the password on a text file on the Windows desktop is not really an issue because it's their system. But you never know. It could just be a simple malware attack. It could just be someone peeking. It could just be some other attack that was happening on that employee's device or document, and the attacker accidentally sees this password. They're like, oh yeah, this person is employed at this broker and his password has just found out. So the company, the broker, may not even be the target of a hack, but if you leave those doors open, you never know. These are all attack vectors. So how employees handle critical passwords within the organization, again, there's no technical cost to any of these two things that I just talked about. You just have to be conscious of it. Train employees not to share passwords, train them not to save it on their desktops, and make sure that there are no passwords that look like my broker at 123 or 124. So these are really simple things that can go a long way. And coming on to the more critical points, and sorry, just to add office network passwords, guest Wi-Fi passwords. These are all really simple things that we can change today, right now, and these could go a long way in protecting us. And moving on to a slightly more complicated topic, I think bulk of the members have used trading platforms and back offices built by a handful of vendors. And I've seen some of these platforms. So when Zerodha started out, Zerodha was also using a vendor-based back office. And eventually over the last 7 years, I've been with Zerodha for 7 years, we've cut out a lot of vendor dependencies and build a lot of technology in-house. Now, I absolutely understand that that is not really possible everywhere. Not everybody has a technical background, or not everybody can think like a technologist. But we can still be conscious that our systems are being managed by external vendors and parties. And you never know what sort of weaknesses those vendors have. Let's say your back office is being maintained by vendor XYZ. They log in, they do maintenance, but your sensitive customer data is in that system. And you don't know if the systems or the means that the external vendors are using to maintain your systems are secure or not. You can have the best firewalls in your office, in your company, but if your IT vendor is not secure, that is a giant gaping hole. Now, personally, I don't really have an answer on how this can be addressed. And this was one of those points of contention 2 years ago when we were discussing this bit about STQC certification for back offices. I still do not have an answer. It's unfair on the members. It's an unfair burden on the members to get external vendors to get certifications. I mean, it's the right thing to do, but it's also highly difficult. So what can even be done? And what can brokers do about the security vulnerabilities present in the systems that are given to them by the vendors? Because at the end of the day, the liability of any breach or hack is on the broker, definitely not on the IT vendor that did that system. So I mean, maybe, again, it's a matter of cognizance. If all the members are cognizant of this and are conscious of this, and they get the handful of vendors who do these things to look at it seriously and exert pressure, lobby, I don't really know the right terminology, that would also be a great place to start, because one of the biggest gaping loopholes in this entire ecosystem is vendor-based products, which are not really secure, and vendors who have no liability on the hacks or breaches or anything that happen at brokers. Again, moving on, there was a brief mention of unlicensed Windows systems earlier, and most desktop computers everywhere are Windows systems, licensed or unlicensed, and Windows being so popular has been one of the biggest targets of malware attacks over the last 2-3 decades. Because everybody uses Windows, people of all ages, people of all levels of technical savviness, hackers just write viruses and malware for Windows because that's what everybody uses. So one of the easiest things to do, I mean, maybe I shouldn't use the word easy, but one of the things that can be done is, if you have a choice to not use Windows, you could exercise that choice. So we have, at Zerodha, we have, I think, close to 1,200 employees. And, hundreds of employees across support, account opening, KYC, everywhere. So over the last 4 years, we've switched out, I think, 90-95% of all Windows systems to Linux desktops. And to be very specific, Ubuntu. It looks and feels pretty much exactly like Windows. Most employees only need a browser, Chrome browser, and a Word editor and those things. And it works absolutely beautifully. There's no technical complexity. And employees that did not specifically need Windows systems to operate Windows programs, we switched out their desktops to Ubuntu desktops. And to add, Ubuntu, it's free and open source software, Linux. And you can, there is zero cost. You put in a CD, you install it, and it's done. Yes, you need some technical expertise to get that installation done, but after that, that's it. In 2 days, you're used to it. So you get a free system. You don't have to worry about licensing. And the attack vector reduces exponentially. If 99% of the viruses and malware are written targeting Windows, maybe 0.5 is written targeting Linux. It's not that Linux systems are inherently technologically more secure. It's just that the attack surface is really low. So thanks to that, I can sleep in peace thinking that I know that, 1,000 employees are not plugging in random USB devices to suddenly get infected, because the attack vector is significantly reduced. And then, again, there are standard policies that you can apply. On your work laptop, you can disable external devices being plugged in. These are all, so far, none of the things that I've mentioned incur any cost. They incur attention and effort, but no cost. So, just by being cognizant, there are these things that you can do. And another thing that we've done, and that we've been extremely careful about, again, is controlling how humans access various systems. As I said, we have 1,000 employees and 1,000 people look at various different things. And no matter, there's no technology that can intelligently monitor and figure out who's looking at what. Did this employee look at something that employee was not supposed to do? So what you can do is institute common sense policy, really hope for the best. So reduce access by default. The default stance should be nobody gets to access or see anything. Then you start by saying this person works in support. This person needs to see a client's account balance. So you figure out a way to only show the account balance to them. Somebody who works in compliance may want to see a person's phone number. So you tweak the system to only show the phone number to that person. Now, this is slightly more complicated because this involves work, technicalities where you have to control your back office systems and whatnot to only show what people are supposed to see. But if you do this again, it scales up. At Zerodha, there is not a single employee who has like a God mode access to all systems, not the CEO. As the person who looks after technology, I don't have access to most systems. I only have access to the systems that I work on. And similarly, people in sales don't get to see a person's financial details. Or people in account opening and KYC, they don't get to see a person's financial details or any of those things. So we've made it so that employees get no visibility into data by default. And then we slowly add bits and pieces that are only absolutely required by them to do the jobs well. So everyone sharing the same admin access, everyone sharing the password around, that's a human problem. There's no technological solution. And again, another conscious decision that can be taken is to disallow everything by default. And coming on to technological means, we talked about firewalls, we talked about VPN systems, we talked about, these are all mentioned. Now, for someone who's not technical, it's difficult to visualize or understand how a firewall functions. What exactly is it? How much does it cost? Firewall is basically a software program that prevents traffic coming in. And traffic is basically someone going to your website.com/backoffice or whatever. How people log on to your back office or trading platforms. So there are hardware firewalls, dedicated device, high-end devices, etc. But there are free and open source, completely cost-free firewalls that can be used to protect pretty much all your systems. So at Zerodha, bulk of the VPN setup, firewall setup, absolutely everything we've built in-house because we have a technical team in-house, but they're all using free and open source software. All of the things that I've just mentioned so far, all the technological measures that Zerodha has taken, we've built it all using free and open source software. Get ready-made software, tweak them a little bit, connect everything together. We are not paying licensing fees to any external companies or corporations. There is no financial burden or technology costs in the form of licensing. Of course, we've had the technological expertise to figure out what to use and where. We know that this is the free software that we can use to enable this. But beyond that, we have not paid for those things. So it is entirely possible to create a sophisticated technical infrastructure without actually buying software. There are more than enough high quality free and open source software out there, but you have to have the technical expertise. Now, it's again impractical for hundreds of small members to build their own in-house tech teams. So maybe this is something the association could consider. Maybe getting a highly technical team together to design, implement these things. Not just check boxes on a form, but actually sit down and install VPNs, those sort of things that all the members can use. And to me, that seems to be the only practical solution to actually implementing. And I've stressed on the cost part many times because I don't think the regulators really have a perspective on how much of the financial burden these things could be on a small enough member. And the way proprietary software is priced, it could be just ginormous, ridiculous numbers. Which is why I've stressed and illustrated that there's plenty of free options available. You just have to have the technical expertise. And one of the ways, the association could have that is probably to form, a pool, a group. And I think that kind of, touches upon everything I wanted to really just quickly highlight in a short span of time that we have. But again, my personal request as a technologist to everyone is to not really look at this circular as a bunch of check boxes. You get a audit done, you get a certificate. That does not make you secure. You can get the most valued certificate in the world. That does not change one thing about cybersecurity. It all comes down to us being conscious about all these little things, from not having a web camera on a laptop to telling the employees not to share passwords, making sure that they don't see those passwords, making sure that that is how you become secure, not by getting that certificate. The certificate is a regulatory, it's a bureaucratic process, but I request everyone just to be cognizant of these things and figure out a way amongst the association to get technical implementations across members, because it's super serious stuff, and you never know what one tiny leak of one client at one member could open up. It could just be a political thing, who knows? It could be anything, a number of things that we can't even imagine. So that was it really. I mean, that's all I really wanted to quickly touch upon. Thank you.
Thanks, Kailash. I must say that you've covered a wide range of things. I mean, there were three things that really resonated with me, and I'd like to share those three at least, so that it sort of cements what you just said. Insofar as not having a web camera, I think so. I can tell you my way of doing this is that I dedicated a sort of separate iPad just for these calls. I try my best not to use that for anything else. It's obviously a simple exercise because very often you get, very long-winded sort of, codes for the meetings and things like that. Because, WebEx is just one of the platforms, right? I mean, there are multiple platforms that you might need to connect to, especially with something like Google Meet. And as a consequence, I don't even log into those emails over here. I think, because I've tried to sort of inculcate that with my kids, they always think that I've got something illegal going on because I'm trying to segregate so much. So they always call this the smuggler's iPad. But in a real sense, it is important for us to start looking at these things, because, and even if with the best of policies, you will still leave some doors open. You never know while you're chatting with somebody or having a conference and you suddenly need to look up something on Google, or you log into something, you will open up attack vectors. And I think the important thing for us to understand as members is that the more we segregate, the more we do access control type of situation, the better it is for all of us. So that was one point. The other point was about the Ubuntu laptop, Ubuntu desktop, and I'm glad I at least have some companion in this space, because my employees, of course, hate it, because we switched to Ubuntu desktops about I think 5 years ago. No, maybe not 4, 5, maybe 3 years ago. And we've tried out variations of Linux for our desktops. I don't think we are at 95%. I think we are still at probably about, maybe 85% Ubuntu, and we still have about 10-15% of Windows-based platform. But I think it is important for members, especially to start to explore that. I mean, most of us at some level have some technical person in the office, even if we are small members, because by now it's become impossible to be running this business if you don't have any technical expertise. So I think, it's a fantastic suggestion. Pretty much, I have not seen too many programs that cannot be run in Linux. There are only certain things that the Exchange, for example, mandates that you need to be connected on a Windows system or something, and there you may not have any control. But by and large, in terms of the enterprise moving to that, it makes a hell of a lot of sense. So I look at, Kamlesh is on, there in the chat, in the webinar, and for a company like theirs, which has got maybe 1,000, 2,000 employees, it's a fantastic way to reduce costs, right? I mean, at the end of the day, on an average, even if you don't take Microsoft Office, the average expense you have is roughly about 4,000 rupees or 3,000 rupees per PC for every single Microsoft license that you have to pay. It's a massive saving for most organizations, right? So I think it certainly resonates with what you just said. The third thing which I think I thought was very significant was about this enterprise of, can we set up like a small security technology group within the association which can go out and actually do that work for multiple people. And as you rightly said, firewalls, there are very few firewalls which are really hardware based, and those are really high end ones which I doubt very much most members are today using. Most firewalls that are being used are basically software firewalls, and there are enough sources out there for people to use. I mean, of course, you have to marry that up against ease of use and a support team and X, Y, Z. But I think it's a very interesting idea, and I will take the liberty on behalf of CPAI and on behalf of our president to certainly request you to be part and parcel of such an enterprise if we do end up going down that track. I mean, it's great to see somebody who's an open source advocate and who's doing fundamentally a very capitalist sort of job. And it's the best of both worlds to my mind. And so, hopefully if the president deems it fit, then, and if he can take that forward, I think it would be great if you're involved in that. Having said all that, I think, and your last few statements about the fact that, go ahead, Kailash.
So, I totally agree with you. We'll definitely have a team of people. It's a great suggestion of pooling resources. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. The last few things that we spoke about was this issue of actually having a certificate, because the regulator has now mandated that we have that. And I think we ought to stop seeing this as just another certificate. If we don't, I mean, we as businessmen, we also tend to say, hey, can this do the whole job and get on with it, and you move on with things. But as you've highlighted, as all the speakers earlier have highlighted, it is important that we try to think of the certificate more from a compliance implementation standpoint rather than just a certificate. And in that context, it's important to remember that we still have to make sure that the compliances are in order. And we have Mr. Sanjeev Agarwala, who is one of the leading consultants, auditors for this same, and I request him to say a few words, just to give his perspective on how he sees when he goes to members, and how does he think that incrementally at least can members become better.
Thank you, Sanjay. Yeah. I think I want to share the screen. Can I get the share screen, please?
Prashant, please enable him for this presentation.
Is that screen visible?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Good morning, everyone, and thanks to all the organizing committee for having me here and giving me the opportunity to speak on this topic. My topic is beyond cybersecurity compliance, where my point is that we don't have to treat audit as a certificate, but more like an area of improvement, not something to just tick in the box, but areas of identifying areas of improvement so that you can further strengthen your system. To start with, few fundamentals. So what is all about audit? It is a systematic process where an independent person, he should not be, if he's inside the box, he will be actually not finding the issues. So he should be outside the system, objectively looking at what is there, the facts and the evidences, and then he comes with the conclusion what is missing based on the set demand. It can be regulatory demand, or it can be some standard like ISO, or it can be regulatory like CPAI. It can be anything. So these are basic steps. Like you have to establish the scope, for example, CPAI. Then you have to understand the auditor's environment, how small the broker is, what he's really doing, what kind of systems he has, and then you try to identify what may be the possible risk, because if you're doing the risk-based audit, that is what brings maximum value to an audit. So if you are able to do a risk-based audit, you are able to plan out of those areas, which are the areas which are very critical ones, which has the highest risk, and then you can go to medium and the low risk. So you do a preliminary audit where you cover the high areas, and then you do a deeper audit in those areas where you think there are more issues and where you need a deeper inspection. Sometimes you may also want to do some testing of controls. For example, you may want to take a sample of firewall policies and try to see whether they are good enough. Once you have done all those things, then you actually prepare a report based on facts, not on subjectivity, and you report it, because at the end of the day, the action happens on what is being reported. In the context of CB circular, it is NSC, BSC template. If you have something which is an observation needs corrective action, then obviously you have to do a follow-up. That is, in short, simple audit process. Now I wanted to do something about risk-based audit. So here it saves time on the auditor's part also, because now he's aware that he's using the 20/80 principle. He knows that 20% of the areas are those areas within the company that will have the highest risk. So if he's doing a very justified job, he will uncover definite areas of improvement that will actually give greater benefit to the auditee and impact the overall business of the firm. It also helps in identifying areas. If an auditor discovers area which is of high risk, then they can also fine-tune their checklist and what they want to check, so that they are actually able to do a more focused audit and actually cover all the important points. Then there are various types of audit. You have compliance audit, which is a CB one. You have finance audit, you have IS audit, and then there is a computer forensic audit, which is you do something where something has gone wrong, you have an attack, you have lost data. So in those scenarios, you need a very specialized kind of investigation, and that requires a very different set of skills. It's not just a cybersecurity audit, but a computer forensic audit. Sometimes you can have all of them together, and sometimes you may also want to do a specialized audit in a specific area. For example, you may want to do a fraud audit because now when you were doing all this thing, there was unauthenticated transfer of money, and there are legal ramifications to that. So in those scenarios, you may also have to do a fraud and forensic audit. Cyber security is also a kind of specialized audit, and if you are having a lot of technologies, sometimes like SOC team audit or DLP audit, you can also have those kind of audits considering when their setup is very, very huge. So depending on how big is your setup, is it a 5 people company or 3,000 people organization, you can demand various kind of audits. Now what an auditor looks for, it is all about objective evidence. So these are what qualifies as evidences for the ISACA guidelines. What has auditor observed during the course of audit, the various notes or the work papers he has written. Then he will talk to 2-3 people and try to find if the fact is really correct or there is a difference in opinion. He can look for evidences in the log and records, maintenance systems and various places. And sometimes he may also do some testing using tools to find if a fact is correct or incorrect. So these are some of the ways the evidences are uncovered during audit. Now, what is so special about cybersecurity audit when you have a lot of system audits? The thing is, the cybersecurity is all about cyberspace, and cyberspace is not regulated. You have innumerable points of entry due to internet. Anybody can come from any part of the world if you are in the internet. Anyone can come as anonymous. There are a lot of technologies there to attack you, and the defense side of technologies sometimes evolve better than the attack kind of technologies. Sometimes it is very difficult to find where the attack is coming from, so you can't take action. And even if you are able to find the person, you can't take it because he is in a different jurisdiction. For example, if the attack is coming from US, what are you going to really do? And the third part is sometimes people blindly trust anything in the cyberspace. So anything virtual, they think it must be true. And that is the third part, is don't double validate it, and that is where many of the cyber risks come. So now what are the additional challenges brought by COVID-19? So now you have social distancing and work from home scenarios. So people have been forced to work from home. Now you are not within the contours of the physical and logical boundary of an organization. Now you are actually in your homes. Now the point of entries for a hacker are innumerable. Previously it was maybe 1 or 2, maybe your firewall or some ideas kind of thing, but now each one of the endpoints, the terminals, has become the point of entry. Now, but still in the context of audit, the brokers and depository participants are trying to maintain compliances during this unprecedented time. And we auditors are also facing a challenge because when you are doing audit, you also have to cover all the steps, right? And you have to uncover the evidences, you have to cover all the scope, you have to make sure that you have the right evidence so that you can report the finding, and sometimes you also have to make sure that the technology is really working when is the deadline. For example, you want to file a report, but imagine the system is down. Okay, then that is also a challenge. Some of the things which I found during my audits with a lot of brokers is that they are using a lot of technologies, but even within the technologies they are using, they are not using the features to the fullest. Their technology, firewall, IDS, IPS, anti-malware, even the basic things that they have, sometimes they have something which if they can configure properly, they can actually at no cost increase the cyber security posture of their organization. The second thing I found during the course of audit is people are aware of some level of cyber security, but this is an area of improvement because they still are evolving in understanding the cyber security risks that can really go wrong. But the good part is they are actually trying to improve the systems and processes. So that is what we are finding when we are doing the audit. What is so special about cybersecurity audit? You have to understand the cyber attackers' mindset and they are up to some tricks. So if you understand their mindset and tricks, then you will take measures so that you don't pass. You're not passing the audit just for the sake of it, but actually you're defending from the attack. Okay, and if you want to do good cyber security, it is just not about technology. You need to have, the first thing is about adversarial mindset. That is the mindset how the attacker is thinking. Unless you have that mindset, what can go wrong, how the person can come from internet or wherever digitally you are connected, be it social media or email or webmail or mobile phones, any of the ways, all those channels, if you are not aware of how the hacker may be exploiting it, then you run the risk that you may enable something which will end of the day may be attacked. So cybersecurity, destructive practices and what are the protective technologies is one more area where brokers they have to concentrate on. There are a lot of standards. Standards is not just for compliance but also to derive relevant controls and practices which they can add incrementally so that they can improve their practices. Again, in the world of cyber security, there is a high risk of legal issues. Crime can happen. So you should be aware about laws and regulations. That is also very important. And all these things actually are very important when we are trying to do cyber security. So these are some of the threats. But one of the threats I wanted to make aware is about darknet. We are aware about internet, but there is a parallel world where people after hacking, they steal all the personal details and then they sell it in the darknet. Okay, and all these darknets are accessible by using Tor browsers where people may log in as anonymous and try to sell your data. And the other hackers can buy that data and then they will have all your credentials and your personal data, and that will become the first point of entry by which they can attack you. So these are some of the modus operandi used in the COVID-19 attack, which is available also on the certain site. So they know people are running on fear, so they will try to sell you free discount codes for doing COVID tests, and they will give you promotional codes. They want to give you some apps which are actually infected apps. They will put trojans on your system. They will put tracking kind of trojans on your system. And these are some of the malware families which were uncovered by certain in this COVID-19 scenario. So this is something which the system persons and the organization have to be aware. They have to consistently visit the certain websites where all these informations are made available in advance. So they should study this, and if they can apply all these countermeasures, then the risk is reduced. So I wanted to speak about the hacker's mindset because that is what makes the difference. Typically, a hacker tries to find your digital footprint. It can be email ID, user IDs, your social media accounts, whatever details you have posted in any of the internet sites. It can be anything. Then based on whatever information they have, they will try to scan codes and services provided you are on the internet. You are somewhere on the public internet or you are digitally present. And there are possible 65,535 points of entry. That is the avenues available to the hacker. They also try to study the behavior of the user. Okay, whether he is a disciplined user, he locks his workstation, he locks out when the work is done, or he is an ignorant user. So don't discount the hacker. They are studying you. They are not attacking you just blindly. They are trying to understand your behavior. They are trying to understand your pattern when you shut down your system. Do you do only during daytime, in weekends, and what kind of tools you are using to access your system? What is your psychology? Whether you are driven by greed or you are driven by fear or you love challenges. So based on that, they will do targeted phishing attack. They will try also to understand the law of the country. So if you have weak regulations in India, the hacker can come from elsewhere, any part of the world and can do damage, and they know if the laws are not strong, nothing will happen. So that is one thing which the hacker also studies, the laws of the country. They are also trying to understand whether he is being tracked. So you have technologies like honeytrap and firewall and IPS. So they will also try to find whether he is being tracked. So he will try to avoid those things. So in short, these are his mindsets. And if my broker friends are able to understand this mindset, it will go a long way in understanding how to choose technologies, how to configure your system, how to better prepare yourself for cyber security. This is the cyber skill chain. Basically, I don't want to go into details of it, but this is how a attacker actually starts from a footprinting and goes to the point that he is taking total control of your system and then penetrates the complete ecosystem. These are some of the dilemmas. You want to do good cyber security, but you have challenges. You have a lot of people who want admin privileges, super admin privileges. You have a lot of passwords, lot of systems, and then you have to remember a lot of passwords because each system cannot have the same password, and then you have to keep on changing them frequently. So you have a password dilemma. Then you have applications which demands that they will only run if you have admin. So one side you are saying minimize admin, but then the other side is the application itself is demanding more of admin privileges. And then you have scenarios where the browser is not secure. So if you want to work something, we are saying enable all. Only then the system will work if it is web-based. So one point you are saying I want application security. The other aspect is you have to enable everything. Only then the things will work. So it's a dilemma because then how will cyber security work? The other thing is if an incident has happened, now can anyone understand what is the legal implication of it? So many of us don't know. So if you don't know it, then it is a scary aspect of it because sometimes you don't report it also because you are scared that if you report it, something will happen to you. Okay? And then you have a single cybersecurity person. He is supposed to do many things. And then you have a perception challenge. It is cybersecurity is perceived as an IT issue and not a governance issue or an IT issue. And the list goes on. Sometimes everything is given to the vendor. The organization has no idea what they are up to, what is being managed, who is doing it, whether it is further subcontracted. So these are all the dilemmas which is also faced by the auditors because you want to achieve cyber security, but if you don't have this, the things will not work. So how do you balance these things out? So you have to move from the compliance mindset to the continuous improvement kind of thing. You have to treat audit not like a tick in the box or a certificate, but areas of improvement. That is what I have to say. 5 basic steps. You have to first do a policy. It can be a basic policy. You have to establish the accountabilities and the responsibilities because if you don't identify anyone, then if something fails, you will be having no answers at all. Most critical step, if you don't identify what is the most critical thing to you, then you will not know what to protect in the first place. And once you have identified, you have to identify the cyber risk. And then you may have a brief plan how you are going to achieve the protection, implement them, and then awareness. That is the key, and there is low cost. If you are aware, then you will take more measures. So you have to keep your eyes open. You don't need very fantastic tools. You just have to see what is being popping up in logs and various monitoring agents and audit logs. Even if you do a very good job on those things, 90% of the things are taken care of. And then inside of this thing, everything can go wrong. So you also have to prepare for the worst case scenario. Sometimes you can have CCMP. It may not be a very huge document. It can be just your strategy, what you will do if something really goes wrong. And then you have to do this continuously and not one time like an audit. And then briefly about various frameworks, like you have 27001. This is a certifiable standard. It provides you 114 controls. You can pick based on your risk assessment what you want to do to improve your security posture. Then you have the NIST cyber security framework with 5 pillars. These are the various domains. Again, you can pick based on your risk assessment what you want to achieve to further improve cyber security posture. Then you have the COVID framework, again, which is having the governance piece of it and the management piece of it. Again, this is free for members, not a very costly standard. Again, this provides you a lot of controls, and depending on where you stand, again, you can mature your processes. The other thing is, you have to think cybersecurity proactively. You have to build cybersecurity in the design itself. So when you are designing things, You don't have to do like an afterthought. Something has failed, now you will say, okay, things should be SPQC certified level 4. So that has to be taught beforehand. You can't say that, okay, this product has to be level 5 or this person has to be ISO certified. It cannot happen overnight. So, if you are going to roll out new products and technology in the stockbroking ecosystem, this is the right time. You have to think that we have to design security right upfront and not once the product is rolled out. So these are some of the principles of least privilege, code review, defense in depth, making sure that the default security systems or security settings are enabled. And if the system fails, they fail securely. Make sure that the audit trail activity is really working fine. And then if the vendor is himself disclosing the vulnerabilities in advance, then the risk of zero-day vulnerabilities will also reduce to a maximum extent. The thing is, if the vulnerabilities are not reported proactively, then the hackers are exploiting it and then reporting it. So that is a very sorry thing. So if you are designing the system based on these principles, then you will have lesser incidents. These are some of the practices already touched by the previous speaker, so I'll leave it out. So then about COVID-19 cybersecurity measures. So now you're all working in home kind of environment. So these are some of the security measures. You have to make sure that you are using only authorized software with two-factor authentication or whatever authentication mechanisms and countermeasures which are available in the tool. You have to make sure that people are adequately aware that they don't click on links and that is coming from unknown sources, because that is the easiest way the hackers are trying to attack you. Try to whitelist the application which you think you are going to use it and blacklist all other things, because now you know your window of attacks will be reduced because you are only using 5 things for your business, so only whitelist 5 of them. So now you have actually blocked all the blacklisted applications. Similarly, you can block unused ports, and by doing all these things, you actually prevented many of the things. And even if this what you have whitelisted something is exploited, if you keep on monitoring your VPN connections and if something suspicious is happening, if someone trying to send you Word files with macros from unknown sources, so all these things, if you are alert, then obviously you will reduce 95% of the work from home cyber security risk. These are additional things. So one of the critical point is also about Wi-Fi routers. And now you may be using your home Wi-Fi routers, so they will have encryption features like WPA2 protocol. So don't enable the weaker ones. If you do this, the security will improve. Make sure that you are not using free Wi-Fi, because then you run the risk that other hackers will also be part of the same Wi-Fi. Then you can use other secure teleworking.
Sanjeev, can I just request you to wrap up in the next couple of minutes? Actually, as I said, the format is such that maybe in another couple of minutes if you could kindly wrap up.
Yes, I'm wrapping in 1 minute because this is my last slide.
Oh, perfect.
Okay. So then you should make sure that you are not installing unapproved software and you are not visiting any website which is really not required. You have to make sure that you are using only officially approved laptops and PCs. Make sure that the basic security measures are really working fine. You have not disabled them. And recently you may have heard about Zoom attacks. So even if you are teleconferencing or you are using Zoom, you should be aware about the Zoom attacks also, because some hidden person can join your communication and listen to what you are discussing in the Zoom. Sometimes people type passwords on the Zoom chat. So if you are updating your Zoom software and all these things, then very useful. These are some of the standards and frameworks. RBI cybersecurity, PCI, DSA, CIS. So the list is big. Even if you do a Google, you will find a lot of things. That was my last slide. Thank you. I think I just satisfied Sanjay sir requirement.
Thank you.
I'll hand over.
Thank you so much, Sanjeev. I wish I had met you much earlier. The amount of information that you managed to pass on to our members was phenomenal. I think what happened is that while you may be able to look at things from a technology perspective,
it's also important to have a process-oriented approach. Unfortunately, I also don't have a fantastically process-oriented approach, but I'm so glad that you managed to give us such a good perspective, and I would certainly, on a personal level, certainly keep in touch with you for all of this. I'm going to very quickly hand it over to Virendraji to thank everybody, but personally, I think I must say that the type of perspectives that I have heard today, and I would like to think that at least I try to keep aware of cybersecurity. The type of perspectives that I've seen today, to me itself, they were eye-opening. So thank you very much for everything. Virendraji, maybe if you could take it forward.
Yes, Sanjayji, it's my honor to give a vote of thanks. It was a very interesting discussion. We came to know a lot of things. So I'll just keep it brief because I know we are on the clock. So I'd like to start off by thanking Soniji from NSE who gave us a broad overview of the background in which the regulation evolved from ISO to SEBI. And also Pravesh Moon from the NSE ISSC team who enlightened us on the aspects of the practical implementation in the work from home era and how they are implementing controls over their systems, etc. Neeraj Arora ji explained to us the various legal provisions applicable to the cybersecurity and enlightened us that we need to get SEBI cybersecurity norms to be adequate compliance under the IT Act, else we will have to comply on both sides. So that's something I think the association can pursue with the regulators. And Kailash Nath was obviously a very enlightening discussion to hear. He highlighted why the size of the firm is no safeguard against possible risks, and the checkbox mentality should not be there to the compliance. But he also told us about the practical implementations and the real-life scenarios which they have faced. And of course, the suggestion on the Ubuntu desktops was something which was a very practical suggestion which many of us can actually implement very quickly. And also the idea which he mooted that we should build resources at an association level to help all members do cybersecurity was a fantastic one. That would keep the cost low, and that's definitely an aspect to think of. Sanjeev Agarwal ji for highlighting the practical implementation in the cybersecurity audit and the process or approach to the same. And last but not the least, Sanjay, our dear past president, for guiding this session and ensuring that everybody is on the clock. And so I'll not take up much more time, and thank you everyone for joining us. We look forward to meeting you again.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Bye. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, all of you.